Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this particular video, I'm going to be presenting to you my top 5 most wanted Transformers Studio Series figures. Those of you who collect the Studio Series toy line will know that it is a line that primarily focuses on the 6 live-action Transformers movies. These movies consist of the Transformers 2007 movie all the way up to the most recent Transformers Bumblebee movie. In this particular list, I'll be showcasing figures that span from the entirety of the movies and characters that may or may not have already got a previous figure in a previous movie toy line. The reasoning behind why I'm doing this particular list is because the Studio Series has really allowed collectors to get some definitive representations of their most favourite characters from the entire 6 movie lineup. So therefore, without further ado, let's move on to my number 5 top pick. Kicking things off, my number 5 top pick for the most wanted Studio Series figures has to be Transformers Age of Extinction Galvatron. Now, the character of Galvatron isn't necessarily a character that is well loved by the movie fans, and for good reason as well. Michael Bay didn't really execute Galvatron very well in the Age of Extinction movie. However, nevertheless, I actually was quite fond of Galvatron's design and really hoped to have seen it again in the Last Night movie. Nevertheless, that wasn't the case, and the design that we got in Age of Extinction was a one-off design that we only ever saw in that particular movie. I personally was a fan of the way that Galvatron transformed, however the figure itself didn't necessarily translate very well. In the movie, Galvatron does break up into billions of different molecules and then forms into a really awesome Freightliner Argosy. Obviously, the figure themselves actually have to transform, so the designers of Hasbro decided to give the Voyager Galvatron for the Age of Extinction toy line a really massive backpack in order to help aid the very stylistic and slick look of the movie design. Of course, in a real life representation, this isn't practical, and the original Galvatron figure that we got was quite lackluster, which is a shame seeing as the design of Galvatron is actually really quite cool, and I was actually quite a fan of it. I really do hope that the Studio Series gives Galvatron a second shot of perhaps a Voyager class figure in order to make a more movie accurate, more definitive representation of the on-screen character design. Ways in order to combat the massive backpack would be to essentially allow for a more complex conversion. The Age of Extinction toy line is renowned for having very simplistic transformations, and the Studio Series, from as far as I'm concerned, has actually given us some of the most complex Transformer figures in a very long time. So I personally believe that if the Studio Series was to give Galvatron another shot, that it would have to be a lot more complicated than the original figure in order to help hide and distribute different vehicle mode parts all over the figure for an overall more movie accurate looking Galvatron. Now, turning to my number 4 pick for most wanted Studio Series figures has to go to the Transformers Movie 1 Megatron. The first movie Megatron is one of my favourite Megatron designs, just really and truly because it was the first ever live action representation we ever got for Megatron, so it's really stuck with me growing up with the live action movies. I was a massive fan of Megatron's alien looking jet. As abstract as it looked, it was definitely very unique in its design, and no other Megatron has really been able to replicate how abstract that particular jet design was. The reasoning behind why it's number 4 and not higher on the list is simply due to the fact that we already have a very movie accurate looking movie masterpiece version of Movie 1 Megatron, so therefore this figure isn't necessarily as soon as possible release. However, judging from previous listings, I definitely do think that this particular design of Megatron is on the horizon for the Studio Series toy line. Personally, if they are going to release this figure, which I do definitely believe they will, I would love them to include a small little frenzy figure, much like how they included Igor with the leader class Dark of the Moon Megatron. Another reasoning behind why I believe that this Megatron is definitely a figure we're going to get is because Hasbro have given us all of the characters from the first movie besides this particular Megatron, and of course they're not going to keep the leader of the Decepticons away from their lineup, so I definitely think that this character's announcement is imminent and will definitely be probably one of my most anticipated Studio Series figures yet. Now, taking the 3rd spot on my most wanted Studio Series figures is probably a character that none of you expected, that being the Transformers The Last Night Decepticon Mohawk. The reasoning behind why I've chosen this particular character is because I was a massive fan of how Mohawk was portrayed in the Transformers 5 movie. Of course, he was a character that was very early on killed, which was such a shame as I really do believe he had so much potential and could have definitely really given some characterization to the Decepticons that we have never previously seen before. I was also a really massive fan of his design. They seem to have featured some very humanoid elements into the character. Some traits such as his signature mohawk definitely evoked for a very interesting, very unusual looking design, and I really liked his character bio after the movie came out, that he was in fact an assassin. It would have been fantastic to have seen more of this particular character, as there has really never been a Decepticon like him, and it would be fantastic to get this particular character as a Studio Series figure to go along with the rest of the Decepticons from the movies. He also transformed into a really awesome motorcycle, so that too would be amazing. This figure actually overthrew Onslaught as my number 3rd spot, just simply due to the fact that we are getting Voyager class long haul, which is very similar in design to Onslaught, so I definitely do think that Onslaught will definitely be a character to come from the Studio Series, whereas Mohawk I definitely think is probably a more of a 50-50 choice, as due to his very limited screen time, he really isn't a character that stuck with audiences after the movie had finished. Taking the runner-up spot for my most wanted Studio Series figure has to go to Sentinel Prime from Transformers Dark of the Moon. The reasoning behind why I really wanted Sentinel Prime from the Transformers Studio Series line is because I personally believe that Dark of the Moon was one of the best live-action Transformers movies, and I really do believe that the movie franchise should have really stopped at Dark of the Moon and then rebooted itself with the most recent entry of Bumblebee. Sentinel Prime was definitely the best villain that we've ever got in the movies besides Lockdown. I really liked his character arc, and I thought his design was absolutely amazing. He was kind of an elderly knight and really resembled that of Optimus Prime. I was also a massive fan of his fire truck alternate form. It really was a great rival to Scout next to Optimus, and it made him a very large opponent. The reasoning behind why I really want this particular figure is because we've already got 2 leader class figures from Dark of the Moon, that being Megatron and Optimus Prime, and it really would make no sense whatsoever if Hasbro didn't release Sentinel Prime to go along with Optimus and Megatron, as they are the 2 characters that we see Sentinel Prime really interacting with in the Dark of the Moon movie. I think that the original 2011 leader class figure that we got was fantastic, and it still is held up as one of my favourite leader class figures. However, just with this brand new Studio Series scale, I really think that we need an updated look for Sentinel Prime, and I definitely do believe that he should be in the leader class assortment, just simply due to the fact of how large his alternate form would be. I really do believe that he probably would follow a similar format to the Dark of the Moon leader Megatron, in the sense that his vehicle mode would be very elongated, whereas his robot mode would probably be more along the lines of the Megatron scale, just slightly taller than the Voyager class Optimus Prime. I would also like them to release all of Sentinel Prime's weapons. In the original 2 releases that we got as part of the Dark of the Moon toy line, we only got Sentinel Prime's cannon with the Voyager class and Sentinel Prime's sword and shield with the leader class. That meaning that you had to buy essentially 2 figures in order to get all 3 of the figures' accessories. With a Studio Series release, I believe that they could pack in all 3 of the weapons, and it really would make for an ultimate Sentinel Prime figure, as all of Sentinel Prime's weapons were used throughout the movie, and Sentinel Prime's rust cannon was actually used to destroy Ironhide. At the moment, I'm not too confident that we will in fact see a Sentinel Prime figure in the Studio Series, just as I really don't think it's necessarily on Hasbro's schedule as of yet. However, that's not to say that we won't see it later on in the line, but as long as they release it, I'll definitely be happy with it. So therefore, taking the top spot of my most wanted Studio Series figures has to go to Transformers Dark of the Moon leader class Shockwave. Shockwave was once again one of my most favourite character designs from the Dark of the Moon movie, and perhaps I'm biased to the Dark of the Moon movie as it was my first live action Transformers movie that really got me into the franchise. I was a massive fan of Shockwave's design, and despite him having minimal screen time in the movie, I did think that every scene that he had definitely made an impact on the film. Shockwave has always been a character that I've been a massive fan of, both in Transformers Prime and in the movies, and I really did also like his portrayal in the Dark of the Moon video game. His design is also really awesome. He's definitely a very unique and very interesting looking character, and he's definitely a character that I believe could go head to head with Megatron in being the leader of the Decepticons. Unfortunately, Shockwave was killed off in Dark of the Moon, and we really didn't get much of a throwdown between him and Optimus Prime, but what we did see was definitely awesome, and I would really love if Hasbro could release a definitive Studio Series version of him, just so that we could have an updated, refreshed look at Shockwave. The Voyager class figure that we got as part of the Dark of the Moon toy line is still fantastic. I really thought that Hasbro did a fantastic job in recreating the movie design. He was very, very movie accurate. However, now with the Studio Series, I really think that we need an updated version that has a more accurate colour scheme, as the original version was the majority purple, whereas in the movie he had subtle purple highlights, but was mainly a kind of dry brushing dark metallic grey. I also believe that with this figure being in the Studio Series, we could perhaps finally see him in the leader class assortment, like we originally should in the Dark of the Moon toy line. Shockwave was a massive character in the movie, and was even bigger than Optimus, so if this figure is released, I'll definitely be surprised if this figure is released as a leader class, as a Voyager class I don't think would necessarily present this particular character very well. In terms of alternate forms, Shockwave never actually transformed in the Dark of the Moon movie. However, the original Voyager class figure transformed into a small light tank, So if Hasbro followed that formula, I would definitely be happy with that, just as long as they primarily focused on robot mode accuracy. So there you go, those are my top 5 picks for most wanted Transformers Studio Series figures. Please let me know down in the comment section below whether or not you agree with my list, and be free to let me know what particular figures you would like Hasbro to look at in future releases. I do believe that some of these releases, such as Shockwave and maybe the movie one Megatron, will in fact make it into the Studio Series line. However, I do believe that perhaps characters such as Mohawk may or may not actually feature in the line, just due to the simple fact that they had an extremely minute role in the movie. The reasoning behind why you didn't see the likes of Dino in this particular video was that Hasbro don't actually, as of this recording, have licensing to the Ferrari, so therefore it's not necessarily a matter of fact of whether they want to do the character, it's more or less that they can't due to licensing agreements. However, the 5 on this list are definitely my most wanted figures from this toy line, and I hope that I presented reasonings behind why. If you enjoyed this video, let me know down in the comment section below, and until my next video, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.